the movement is very dangerous because it's not only uses the emotion of empathy, it uses the emotion of contempt. And when those two are brought together, it's really, really deadly. Adding guilt where God has left us free is not going to heal us.
Hey everybody, it's Carmen Schober with the Stasios channel, and I'm joined by a very special guest today, Peter Anderson. Hello, Peter.
Hello, good to see you.
Peter has been on the podcast before, and I've actually been on Peter's podcast before. It's called Sound Engagement. I called him Andrew on our first ever episode together, which is embarrassing.
And I don't think you saw my face until like 30
No,
I didn't.
Into this. I didn't. We've obviously, look how advanced I am now. Here you are. I know your name.
Yeah. I know when I first met you, you just kept staring at the paper on there like, well, I think she'll give me a little eye contact in this interview.
Nope,
eventually
I did not even. Yeah, I was just being socially awkward on accident.
No.
I looked up and there you were. No, Peter's here. Peter is a family and marriage therapist, psychologist. Both
therapist.
Psychologist.
Okay. Yeah, therapist is fine. Yeah,
and a Christian, and you have all kinds of varied interests. It's coming back to me now. Do you have an MDiv?
I do.
Yep.
I do an MDiv and a THM in Old Testament that I got over at Gordon Conwell, and I took some classes through the BTI, Boston Theological Institute, and it was great.
Yeah.
So I have a huge love for ancient texts, and that's my little 3-year-old screaming in the background. And,
a familiar sound.
Yes.
I was like, is that my 2-year-old?
Oh man. And I love Hebrew. I love the Hebrew text, and maybe we'll get into that a little bit. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, you all should go back and listen to my episode with Peter. It was called Loving Others in a Woke World. We talked about a lot of stuff. I'm trying to even remember. We talked about social media and argumentation, all kinds of different things. But today is going to be kind of just a therapy session for me. I'm going to use Peter to talk about the topic of disappointment today, because like I was just talking to Peter earlier before you all saw this, I think 2020 for a lot of people was a disappointing year. Obviously a lot of crazy things happened just on the political scale, but also I think there was a lot of relational strain. I think a lot of that had to do with political things, but that just seems to be a theme. We see people talking about polarization and conflict and not being able to have relationships with certain people anymore, all because of these different factors. And obviously that's really disappointing. If you love people and you care about people and those relationships continuously prove to be painful or confusing or whatever, that's disappointing. So I just kind of want to talk to Peter about that subject in general, since this is what he does for a living. He helps people navigate through various kinds of disappointments, amongst many other things. But yeah, Peter, I guess we just kick this off by do you think, am I right in my feeling about this? Do you think people are leaving this year with a bit of a heaviness? What's kind of your take on disappointment in 2020?
Ooh. Very much so. Yeah. I think, especially a lot of Christians, I would say. I mean, I translated, got to translate Habakkuk 1-4. And it kind of, if it's okay, I would love to read it. It's, please. Says that, "Oh Lord, how long must I cry tears to you, asking for help, and you not hear me? I call to you, look at the violence and wrongs, and you do not assist me. What is it about causing me to look upon iniquity and then causing me to stare at wicked things? Destruction and violence are before me, to the point that only strife and rebellion rise forth. Whereas your law is paralyzed like a cripple, as true justice falls flat. The result is that wicked people gather around, surround me on all sides, and so-called justice looks like a crazy person." And that really spoke to me, big time. I think a lot of people who look at what's going on in cities across the nation, you have everywhere from defund the police to critical race theory really taking over like a wildfire. Our churches, I'm in a community right now, I don't mind even saying this, that probably about 90% of the churches have really full-blown given into what I would call a different gospel. It basically makes people feel guilty for where God has left them free. And these are people that I think most of us, my family, we really trusted, we really loved, and now we don't trust anymore because they're giving a gospel that's not from the word. And so, you feel trapped, you feel alienated, you feel angry. I think a lot of us do. And one of the things I loved about that prayer that Habakkuk is giving is just brutally honest, because he's like, why are you forcing me, causing me to look upon this stuff? And when God talks to him in verse 5, he doesn't correct him. It's not like he says, well, I'm not doing that. And God actually, he actually gives in almost, and not gives in, but says, yeah, in a sense, I am doing this. And I think there's a legit reason why we likely feel that way, because it doesn't look hopeful. Mm-hmm. You have a party that I can't relate to anymore. And I don't want to, I really wasn't a political person until recently, when things just got so extreme. I am pretty moderate. I don't look at one party as the better party. It's nothing like that. It's just, it's gotten to the point where the cancelization of speech, the emotional blackmail that has really risen. And I could talk a little bit about that, because I really got into many of these movements, mainly with my, when I started counseling abused wives, really saw a lot of the similarities. But it just seems like the people that are now going to have power soon are people that have, that I think we're very concerned about. And I think we feel alone. God, why are you not answering the cries of the unborn? That's a good, you have a party that is wanting to see a baby when it is born, and disregarded oxygen. So why are you putting people like that in power? And I don't understand. Do you not care about the cries of the unborn? It feels really lonely right now, because when you have not only, the world is going to act like the world, I get that, but when the church itself starts breaking apart in the midst of a pandemic, it is extremely alienating right now. You could really try your faith. Mm-hmm. Yeah, big time.
Yeah, this is a very good summary. I think that's very true. I know for me, one of the hardest things about watching sort of the way the political landscape seems to be, forming rather quickly, is that, like you said, I'm not a super enthusiastic Republican by any means. Like, I don't look at Mitch McConnell or anybody, I'm like, those are my people. But it's purely out of okay, which one puts forth policies that are actually somewhat, representative of reality and the way things work, and could actually lead to flourishing on some level. And the Democratic Party is just, it's such a clear delineation between good and evil, because like you said, there's the zealous, enthusiastic love for abortion, the way their rhetoric is used in every way. It's so manipulative. It's basically slander. It's sophisticated forms of slander. And so when I just watch, I watch my own friends and family get sucked into it. I see churches get sucked into it. We see, apparently tons and tons of people voting for that. It's very, very hard. It's like a heavy feeling to think yeah, you're right. It makes you feel alone. And obviously you're not alone. There's lots of people who recognize what you and I are saying right now. But it's kind of designed to make us feel alone, right? Even the things we use, like the social media we use, is very hostile to a non-progressive point of view. There's email services that won't let conservatives use their email services. There's, just the list goes on and on of all these ways that when we kind of find one another and are building something, it's sort of these powers that be can kind of squash it and, make you start all over again. That seems to happen a lot, particularly to Christians and conservatives. And it would be easy to feel kind of crushed, which I think every once in a while. Have you heard of the black pill? You know what taking the black pill means?
No, I don't think. Yeah, I don't think
Oh,
I've heard of that. Yeah,
it's
you
kind of
have to
like
illuminate me.
edgy internet speak. So there's taking the red pill, which is from the Matrix. Taking the red pill makes you wake up to reality. A lot of people use it for saying someone becomes more conservative because they realize that so much of like progressive rhetoric kind of sounds good, but it doesn't really like compute to reality. So taking the red pill is doing that. Um, Taking the blue pill is sort of just conforming and going with the flow. Having all the mainstream opinions about everything. And then there's taking the bread pill, which is the bread of life. That's becoming a Christian. And then there's the black pill, which is like you're like it's you basically let yourself be very depressed and
Yeah.
kind of gloomy. And I
Okay.
think you might have seen like Libertarian Christian had a post about no black pills, absolutely no black pills. As Christians, we should not take those, we should not give those. We shouldn't go into a mode of like we're doomed, because obviously we're not doomed.
Mm.
But like you said, it's
Mm.
also not a lot of reasons there doesn't seem to be a lot of reasons to be hopeful.
Yeah.
So
I take a different stance on that. I mean,
yeah.
I think as a Christian, I think one of the biggest problems, not contradicting you, but I think one of the reasons why I became a clinician, as well as why I studied the Old Testament, is because I like doom. I think it's part of our lives. I think there is something that Christians, the American Christian church especially, is very uncomfortable with: sadness.
Yeah.
And when I lost my mother when I was in school, when I was 27, I really got a key for that. When I lost my mom, how very few Christians were very comfortable with just sitting with me in sadness. They were just immediately wanted to go to like Romans 8:28. And I remember feeling how that was just so kind of gross for me in the midst of grief. And I think it's because Jesus weeps, it mentions that, Jesus cries. Jesus on the cross says, why are you forsaking me? And I think a lot of Christians, they look at that passage and they immediately say, well, Jesus is just, he's thinking of a psalm and he's quoting it, and Jesus is on the cross and he's reminded of, oh yeah, I got to make sure I say the psalm so they know that I'm the Messiah. I mean, no, he's really feeling a serious amount of grief. Like why are you, God, forsaking me? And he's the Son of God. And I think grief is a very Christian emotion that needs to be grasped, maybe even more. I see this clinically too. Sometimes I see I see a couple, and he's very matter of fact with her, and she's really going through a very, very difficult time. And when I meet with him privately, I often get the sense that he's himself is very uncomfortable with his own kind of exiles, his own shames, his own hurts, his own pains. Because I think the amount of compassion that you give to those parts that are exiled away, that are very hurt, is going to mirror the same amount of compassion that you give to others when they're in the midst of hurt as well. And I think it's in the sense, like, we as believers, I think it's okay to go deep into the hurt here. Now, obviously, not all the way deep. I
Right.
get that, but a lot deeper than I think where we've been, because I think if there's anything a criticism of the church today, we are immediately no longer giving the world what it most needs, which is the most important answer, which is the gospel, and what our core issue is. And what we've done, because we've compromised on that, is that we want to give these kind of shallow answers to pleasing people or whatnot. But I think when you allow yourself to go to the deeper issues, the deeper pain, the deeper suffering of the world, critical race theory doesn't make sense. It's just kind of like a shallow answer. White privilege doesn't make sense. All these little kind of platitudes,
Mm-hmm.
they get washed away really, really quickly when you've gone deep into the chaos for a little bit. Because you're like, no, that's not the answer, but there is one answer, and that's the man that went and conquered death, as First Peter says, and then he rises again, and he breaks the chains. And you
Yeah.
can't, as Fleming Rutledge really kind of goes into that, and in her book, The Crucifixion of Christ, how the suffering of Christ is often the very thing that so many American Christians want to pass by so quickly. And it's the very reason why the cross becomes so shallow. And we need the cross. We need the cross so much more. So I would just say, I think it's okay to feel grief. It's okay to cry. It's okay to be like, what are you doing, oh Lord? Why, because that's so much better than the option of platitudes, where I think
Right.
a lot of American Christians are going, or denial. And so when I hear
Yeah.
Christians, well, we shouldn't go to the grief, like the libertarian, I'm like, why? What are you uncomfortable with? I mean,
Yeah.
what is it about that you're bothered by? And yeah. So I would just
It's
say,
interesting.
I think it's okay. I think it's okay
Yeah.
to feel hurt, to feel confusion. But hey, I'm going to God with that. I'm not, I'm not gonna,
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm, man,
Right.
and
Probably
I need, yeah,
a better yeah, exactly what you're saying. I'm sure they wouldn't disagree with. It's sort of like that line between grieving and fatalism, I guess, is probably that,
sure.
where
Yeah.
you're hanging out at. But what you said is very insightful, because I just know personally, something I know about myself is, like most Americans, I'm very uncomfortable with the idea of intense suffering. I don't like to think about it. Something that like keeps me up at night is thinking about all the different ways that I know other people are suffering, that I'm not, and I feel some guilt about that. And then I also worry about, if that suffering were to ever happen to me, how would I deal? And I'm always very like, um, my whole thing about suffering is that I spend a lot of time worrying about it, and then thinking about, if I were to ever suffer, or someone I love to suffer, what would be the ways that I could quickly stop that suffering from happening, or make it shorter or something. That's where my brain goes. And I think what you're saying is helpful in reminding me, and probably other people, that suffering is a normal part of life, and there's no guarantee that it's going to be just this little short easy type of suffering, or like a temporary, like, if we just get through this little, a month of suffering, or even a year of suffering, it can be longer than that. And that unsettles me, but even saying it out loud is like a reality, kind of a good feeling too.
Yeah. Yeah, well, Jordan Peterson makes this point that, he says, and I just listened to something by him, and he was saying that how, you know, creepy men who are pedophiles never pick on the kid that is wise in suffering. He always picks on the kids that's totally naive. And it was very insightful when Peterson said that, because I've seen that clinically with people that have been most taken advantage of, whether it's by abusive men or abusive women, or coddling parents who stifle their kids from ever making a decision, or from um, grandmothers who continue to capitulate guilt upon their children and then their grandchildren for basically not coming over every single day, and because they do, they have neglected them, and they're just so many things. And I think a lot of it has to do with taking advantage of people that are overly naive. And not saying that what you're saying is you're naive. You get what
No,
I'm saying? I
no.
don't like suffering either. My goodness. It's not like I'm like,
Right. No,
God,
no.
give me suffering. I'm very
Yeah.
comfortable. I like being comfortable. But I think there is an element of there's an element of what Peterson was saying, which is so brilliant, that it's like we go there not because we like it, but because so that we can, I don't know if I could swear on your podcast, but
Sure.
I don't know, so that we could really smell the bullshit, a whole lot quicker. And,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's what I think we kind of need, that we really do. And it's just like, when I meet with, I think, especially with unhappy Christian couples, I think they were told so much in the beginning, so many of them, that my partner was supposed to be my all in all. They were supposed to mind read all of my desires. They were supposed to understand all of my, all of the things that I really wanted to do, and they just don't fulfill me. And I think what it comes down to is that they had this expectation, this ideal that just never really was fulfilled. It was a very high ideal. And because of that, they bring that same discontentment to their partner, and the partner feels often just like labeled, and I can never get away from her or his label ever. And I think what suffering really does is that it just kind of chisels away all of the nonsensical answers, as I said before, and soothes out this kind of this core need on what is going to help us survive to the next phase that is going to be
Yeah.
essential for wherever we go in the next in through all of this. And we need to come out. That's what I think purity is, through fire. If fire just
Right.
chisels away all of that. And is God giving us a little bit of that right now? I don't know. I like to
Yeah.
think that may be what he's doing. And so yeah,
Ooh.
I think it's no, I don't. I'm right there with you. It's not like I want suffering. It's not like I want to be,
Right.
we homeschool. Do I want us to be told that we're going to be going to public school? That terrifies me. Gosh, that
Yeah.
terrifies me. That terrifies me where, a lot of where how many of our rights are going to be here by the time this whole pandemic is quote over. When will it be over? I
Mm-hmm.
feel like it's going to
Yeah.
be one more thing, over and over and over
Right.
again until they
Right.
have complete control. I could be wrong, but I kind of think I'm not. And so, I'm not looking forward to that because I like where I live. I love where I
Mhm.
live. I live in one of those beautiful places in in all of the east. I mean, in Rockport and Gloucester, it's just absolutely drop dead gorgeous. I mean, I could go look at whales there. I could go look at sunrises at the most beautiful place in the world, right now. And gosh, do I have to move? I don't know. Anyway, so
No,
yeah,
right. No, no,
I
I
hear you.
understand. I have the same. I do the same. I do the same thought process. Here's a something maybe you can help me work through, and this might open up to sort of a good strategy for other people to think about. So, as I was thinking about a lot of things that happened this year, um, obviously I'm disappointed with the state of politics, and I'm disappointed with the way many people are responding to the pandemic. And I didn't do air quotes because I don't think it's real. I did it because the pandemic has come to encompass a lot of things that are
Yes, everything.
ridiculous. I think coronavirus is real, but because that's immediately what everyone does. Like, oh,
Do you
you think
remember the
it's a
Saturday
health.
Night Live character where they always put everything in quote? I did like that. Yeah. All right. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
But anyways, so there are certain things obviously that upset me. I don't like, but I'll be honest, I'm not terribly shocked when government leaders abuse their power. That's not shocking to me. I expect them to do that. I'm not terribly shocked when I'm not terribly shocked at the idea that there would be tons of widespread voter fraud. I'm not shocked. I'm not shocked by certain things. What I am shocked by is what appears to be sort of on a large scale and a small scale, people who I would assume to be reasonable, rational people, um, responding in ways that seem so foolish, I guess. I see many people. I was just looking at today, this this little bakery in New Hampshire is raising some money to fight a legal battle because they were shut down because they didn't do the mask thing or something. And just the comments on this fundraiser for this little bakery were just so full of hatred, so angry that these workers in this bakery wouldn't wear a mask, wouldn't require other people to wear a mask. I'm just seeing this sort of fevered pitch mob mentality on so many things. And I guess that's the part that I don't expect, and that's hard for me to deal with. I see lots of my friends getting whipped up into different movements and using the same kinds of rhetoric, and it really just kind of looks like bullying. There's all kinds of things that go on in the world that I don't like or that I don't think is wise, but I don't sort of participate in a concerted effort to tear those people or those things down. And there really seems to be that sort of spirit going on in a lot of different ways. I mean, you even see it here in this small town in Kansas where I live. If somebody just has something good to say about one of the Republican elected officials, you just get mobbed. It's just this very strange thing. And that's the thing that I'm having a hard time. I think that's what I'm most disappointed in, if that makes sense. Like I kind of expect there to be chaos and
Yeah.
all these things in the world, but what I don't expect is, I guess, looking out at my fellow Americans and thinking like, can I trust you? Are you a crazy person? Like, do you hate me because I am more conservative than you? Do you hate me because I am a Christian? Like, I guess I feel that those questions are much more at the top of my mind than I think they've ever been in my life. And that's a disappointing feeling that I haven't quite figured out how to work with.
I don't think we're, yeah. Well, I think what we're, yeah, no, I think what we're experiencing is a significant amount of emotional blackmail. You know, an emotional blackmail. I would really encourage your listeners to read Susan Forward, her book, Emotional Blackmail. And it's so insightful, and it's exactly what's going on right now. And she kind of quantifies it as, you could recognize it under the acronym of FOG: fear, obligation, and guilt. And it's, you know, making these demands that seem really, really reasonable, but they're really not. You know, making people feel really selfish. You know, kind of pathologizing, a lot of pathologizing that's going on, where it kind of seems like we're the ones that are crazy. You know, and just it's and she, if I could remember it, you know, she has these 4 types of emotional blackmailers that are punishers, self-punishers, sufferers, and I think I can't remember what her other one was. Punishers are just people that literally just want to get their own way. They want to just do anything. They're going to slander you. They're going to cut you off. They're going to make you look. They're going to basically say to you, "My way or the highway." They're going to totally destroy your reputation without a blink of the eye. You know, I mean, you probably heard about that case where that girl that was kicked out wasn't invited to her school because she used the N-word when she was like 15 in a rap song.
And in a rap song, and
yeah,
the guy held on to it for years so he could use it against her. Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, and you look at the New York Times article, and he's just kind of looking at it. It's like he's all prideful. Our society is rewarding people who are abusing others, basically, you know, and it's really concerning. Self-punishers are those people. This is much more in the trans community. You know, if if you don't call me according to your pronoun, you deny my existence, and I'm gonna do this as a harm to myself. Sufferers, you know, is just like, you know, this is where they just kind of put guilt on you. And I think the 4th one is tantalizers, I believe, where it's just, they just kind of, it's very subtle. It's a very subtle type of manipulation. And there's a promise of what will be better if you comply, if you did apologize, if you did just, like, you know, admit that you're white, you know, Carmen, and that you are privileged, you know, you could
admit it.
Yeah, white. I know. And there's a lot of tantalizing going on as well.
Right.
And so in all of those situations, though, you know, there's these demands, and it's a dance, really. And it's a same predictable dance that goes on. And you see it in social media. You see it on Facebook. You see it in riots. You see it in publishing companies trying to talk to their publishers. Yep. You see it at churches, and it's the same dialogue. And that's why it's a really, really good, insightful book, because you have to be aware of what the dialogue is. Because the one thing that Christians, I think, get caught up in is that we have a whole lot of empathy, and we're taught to put others before ourselves. And this is where the movement kind of takes advantage and has a lot of power. The movement is very dangerous because it's not only uses the emotion of empathy, it uses the emotion of contempt. And when those two are brought together, it's really, really deadly. You know, there's a great Greek play called Medea, where she basically is trying to find a way. Her husband, Jason, I'm not going to go into the whole thing, but she ends up killing her own children to get back at her husband. Because if she could just find one way to get back at her husband, she's going to do it. And she ends up killing her own kids, even though she loved them, mainly because she feeds off the contempt that he would not appreciate her and that he's leaving her for another woman. Now you take that with somebody like Jocasta, who ends up marrying at Oedipus, you know, the empathy part. I'm just going to marry, and you bring those together, man, you have a really you have a terrible thing going on. And so what you're doing with this movement is that they're kind of feeding off the quote empathy. I'm using the quotes too. I'm like copying the empathy of the Christian. And then they're they're mixing it with this kind of emotional blackmail and contempt. And that is well, contempt and empathy is what emotional blackmail is. But the dance looks the same. There's a demand. then there's a resistance, a little bit of resistance, and then there's the pressure, okay, and then there's the threatening, and then after that, the victim just complies, and then after that, the manipulator just gets his own way. And this is going to be the same thing over and over and over again until we can just recognize the dance. And the minute you recognize the dance, you do have a psychological part of you that wants to resist control like that. I mean, I always kind of tell couples the best way to stop fighting is to exactly predict what you're going to do. When he walks out of the room, what are you going to do? You're going to get upset and raise your voice. Then he's going to come back, and then he's going to raise his voice a little bit more. And then you're going to cry, and then he's going to cry with you. And then you're both going to feel defeated. And then you're both going to go maybe have a glass of wine. And then you might go make love. And then after that, you're going to ignore it. And then you're going to watch Netflix. And the next day, then you're going to kind of act a little bit, weird about it. And then the very next day, you're just going to all come up again. And then you're like, well, wait, I don't want to do that. And you're like, exactly. So why don't you? So, I mean, your body, yeah, right. Did I just describe our marriage? I'm kidding. No,
well, I was going to say, that sounds actually like a way better fight than like, I don't know.
Right. Like, Peter, how did you
get to have wine and sex and Netflix? I mean, I don't, when we fight, it's not that fun.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I know. I a little bit of truth. Maybe I was kind of self-disclosing a little bit too much. I'm sorry, Carmen. No, but I mean, you naturally want to go against that dance. That's all I'm saying. Mm-hmm. And when you want to go against that, you can then start understanding how destructive this is. And now at least you have control. So to kind of answer your question, sorry if it's too long of an answer, but it's like, good. I think once I have felt so much more empowered in some ways because I deal with this on a clinical level that I just see it and I could predict it. And I feel like in a sense, I've been a little quote, I almost did it, a little better off, I think, because I don't feel so enraptured yet. Now, ask me in about 4 months from now. But I think you have to protect yourself. You don't apologize. You don't go to the victim compliance. You try to look at what you can control. And if you either can accept the things, the way they are, or you could try to negotiate with this friend or whoever for a healthier relationship. And if they're not willing to do it, then you end it. You end it immediately. And you say, I think you use those words. I think you say, this is an emotional blackmail relationship. I don't want to be into it. I want equality here. I don't want manipulation. And you call them out and you name it for what it is. And then you move on, that sounds, I don't think it's cruel at all. I think it's sometimes God, sometimes close. When I first met you and I met Ian and I met, Brad and I kind of reconnected, I lost 4 friends, 2 of which were my best friends. And then I was starting to become bitter and starting to become really sad and even angry and almost wanted to like call them back and just get right back. Like what the, the 2 of them were very close to me. And then God was like putting somebody else like right outside, let's start a podcast. And then like you and I met and we had like this great collaboration. And even though, I mean, nobody's here, like, I wouldn't say it's like, but God's putting other, the point is like, God is not just putting you guys, but like other people in my life that have just been really kind of fulfilling those needs that I thought I needed to continue all this time. It's just, anyway. So
yeah, no, that's awesome. That's a very good point. I do think you're right that when part of, I think some of the reasons why I do, I feel this more is because I am increasingly more aware of the ways that people do try to manipulate me. Like you, I lost a dear friend. Oh my goodness. A friend of 15 plus years, over the dumbest thing. She got mad about a meme that I posted. She texted me about it. The text was very accusatory and, claiming that I was doing all these things that I wasn't doing. And, in a different stage of my life, I probably would have been very like, oh, I'm so sorry, but I said, I get that you don't like this meme. I understand your point of view. Obviously I'm not trying to hurt your feelings or anybody's feelings, but I stand by the message of the meme. I think it's true. If you want to talk about whether or not it's true, then we could do that. But I'm not I'm not really sorry that I shared it. Like, you know, like when I was nicer than that, but that was essentially my position was like, I get what you're trying to do to me and I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to acknowledge that we disagree and I'm going to keep doing what I want to do. And, you know, we're no longer friends and it's painful, but at the same time, I think my relationships in general are much healthier with the people that are in my life because I recognize that. And I even recognize it in myself. I recognize when I'm trying to be kind of manipulative. Like, you know, when I'm doing things where I'm kind of like, I'm not being fair, you know. People have been so unfair to me that I sort of have realized more often that like that's not really true. That's not really my motivation. It sounds good, like, you know, but
yeah. Well, it's funny. The Susan Forrer book, I was equally just as convicted as it really is. Like it does this kind of almost like toilet washing inside of yourself first, and then you kind of look at it at other anyway. So that's funny you say that. Yeah, we're just as guilty. I think we can be.
Yeah, and you got to become aware of it for sure. No, that's helpful. Basically, what I'm hearing from you so far is that it's very valid to feel disappointed. There's real reasons to feel that disappointment. It's very biblical to feel disappointment. It's a Christian emotion and expectation that we would look at the world and be grieved by things that are going on, and even more grieved by things that are going on in the church, I think, like you said, like you touched on earlier. That's a really hard part, right? Because think of how amazing it would be as if in the midst of so much of this, we could look at a really strong, unified, you know, biblically literate church that was resisting this stuff in a strong, consistent way. Like that would be such a comfort, but we don't have that, you know, like it's happening on a much smaller individual level, you know, maybe a little church here and there or a church leader or an individual doing this. It's not sort of this unified body, you know, which is what obviously the ideal that Christ gave us is to be this functioning body working together.
Well, and also I just want to show, you know, I'm not that you're looking for pity points, but that is awful what happened with you and your friend. And I hear you. And I've been there twice, 3 times, you know, and it does some damage inside. It really does. Right. You stop trusting, you know, I still probably have a part that doesn't trust people, you know, and I have my own therapist, you know, and he's really helped me maneuver some of that a lot, but there's still that protective part that kind of does this, waiting for you to do something that might hurt. He might be there for the rest of my life, you know, mainly because of what had happened. And he really helped me because I think it's good that you respect where that part's coming from and not let the part just overly dominate you. Because then you're like, you never want to talk to anybody, you know, and then you let all that. That's how bitterness really kind of takes advantage of people. And I think, honestly, I wonder how much of that is compensation from people that are so bitter and they're so angry all the time. What are they compensating for? What do you know, what are you doing that's really fulfilling your own loneliness? And kind of like what we talked about in our last podcast, try to make it into a reflective question here. You know, why is this bothering you so much? What is it? What do you feel so threatened by? And it's just, I often find when I could get people away from speaking for everybody out here and just speaking for themselves, if they're willing to do that. I mean, because that's really the thing. I think going on your friend or, you know, my other friends as well, they, you know, that they were so, it was so hard for them just to speak for themselves when we had this breakup. And it saddens me just to think that we probably won't ever have a beer together again or ever have, you know, them over to our house. And there's some really hurt memories there.
Yeah.
And just to be really slandered by your friends, though, is deep because, you know, the psalmist talks about that. It's like, you know, my enemies is one thing, but your own friends. But going back on again, I think this is why I think we need to feel the pain, is because I think that's exactly what Jesus felt when he looked at Judas and Judas walks over and gives him a kiss, you know, with a kiss, Judas, you know. And that's why I would go there. I would weep there. I would let that emotion stay with us. And because it's like, that's Christ had that, you know, and man, I'm going to sit with that. I'm going to sit with it but I'm not going to go to the place of, contempt where
Yeah.
I blame and become critical and look down upon others. And, that's, as a marriage counselor, that's really what divorce, that's why people divorce, is contempt. It's the number one reason. It's not affairs. It's not finances. I mean, those things they're not helping,
Right.
but,
Right, right.
but I mean,
Yeah.
it's really, it's to the point where she looks upon her partner, or he looks upon her and says, I'm disgusted. And when that's there's nothing more I can do. I'm just kind of like, I walk them through the divorce, basically. And even though I don't really like that, but I would much rather at least help them cordially end the marriage
Right,
so the
right,
kids
right.
aren't affected. Anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, no, I hear you.
That's an important
Yeah.
insight for sure. Yeah. Well, I like that's a good boundary, I think, like we've kind of covered, disappointment covers a lot of things, can lead you in some dark places, but maybe a good place to know where you need to stop and reconsider is when you're getting to that contempt place, that place of like, who can I blame? Who can I hate? Who can I lash out on for this that's going to make me feel better? I think obviously that's a place you don't want to go. And like you've said, I see that fueling so much of what is the most disappointing about our current cultural climate is people disgusted with others for things that aren't even like, like there are so many labels that are imputed onto me that have nothing to do with me. Like there are disgusting labels. You should be disgusted if I am actually any of those things, but I'm not actually those things. You've constructed a reality where, I'm a bigot and I'm a racist and I'm this, and those things are disgusting. True, but whether or not I actually am is not really the discussion. It's just that it's just put on you.
Well, and I think, and also clinically too, if I could bring some hope here, I've
Yeah.
also seen a lot of hope, and I've also seen a lot of reconciliation when people do. The only way for them to really truly get over their contempt is sharing their needs and feelings in a general way. And how that looks like is to bring a sense of exoneration for themselves through God, or through, if they're a secular person, through a therapist. I do believe that can happen, but mainly through the Lord, and when that occurs, it's crazy how those people will often call back and I've seen it. I've seen my own clients, get really deal with a lot of their contempt, and they call their dad and they cry with them and say, Dad, I'm sorry. And I've seen it's beautiful when that really does happen, but it takes a little bit of work. And the work is, well, the work is work. It's not work. It's self-reflection that I'm just as capable. I think if there's a proverb I want to give to every single person that's canceling everybody, not a proverb, but a passage. It's Jesus when he says, "Let he who is without sin cast the first stone." That's it. And so the older then walk away, and then finally the younger. So the younger ones were the last ones to walk away. And why is that? I think it's because they honestly really didn't feel like they were capable of adultery.
Yeah.
And here are the old guys. Yeah, the old guys are like, oh yeah, I kind of went through the pagan temple over there, and I really wanted to commit adultery, but I didn't. Yeah, I probably shouldn't do this, so I'm going to walk away. Or this guy's like, oh yeah, actually I did do that when I was like 30, so I'm going to walk away. And the younger guys, the social justice warriors, are 18, 17, always on Twitter, even though they're living in their mother's basement, probably, and just, they're all ready. And then they're the hardest ones to really self-reflect. And I think what social media has done is that echo chamber of groupthink, where it's like constantly flattering you, always telling you what you want to hear. But I do think it could help you. I do think it could help. I think it could help. I think it could heal. But again, going back to the gospel, that is why we need it, is because adding guilt where God has left us free is not going to heal us, and we've become vague, we've become lost and shallow by losing what's most important, and that's the gospel. And I think Christians, I love Stacey House, because it's like, we have to be mean again. Because I often teach people like to state their feelings and issues and needs first and foremost, prior to pleasing anybody else. And that's very, very hard for them. If you could just, and I think the most essential thing is, in this case, is kind of what I was saying earlier, is the cross. I have to worry about other people much much later. But anyway, if I think there can be some real healing if we can do this. Anyway.
No, that's great. Well, and actually, maybe this might be a good. I'd like your thoughts on this, and we can end on this. I've been kind of thinking about I need to be doing more intentional sort of building social media content, especially as I prepare, to potentially launch a book and do different things. I kind of need right now. It's just like pictures of what I'm eating, like my family. I need to do more like, useful content to the world. And so I've been thinking about, and I feel like
I think it's great. I love it.
Thanks. I mean, everyone needs to see a picture of fried chicken and a donut.
The fried chicken looked amazing with the donut. Was that a donut that you had? Oh my gosh, that looked amazing. Yes, it looked really good.
No regrets, no disappointment on that.
That's awesome.
But what I've been thinking about is, what brought it to my attention was, so this gal came to me asking for advice. She was going into the same degree program that I went into years ago, a liberal arts degree program. And one of the professors was insisting that she had to read Lolita or she wouldn't be able to get an English degree, which isn't true. You don't have to read any one book to get the degree. You can like take a 0 on one assignment and whatever. And she didn't want to read Lolita because she didn't want to read about a creepy pedophile. Which, I think I maybe would have read it and then like analyzed it and tore it to shreds. That would have been my response. But I get if someone doesn't want to like go into that world. So basically I was trying to think through how to help her have this conversation with this professor who's being really pushy about how she doesn't want to read it. She's not going to read it. And I reached out to a friend of mine who was in the degree program too. And he said, the most effective way for you to do this is to use the language of therapy. Have this girl go to this professor and talk about how it's going to be triggering and it's going to be abuse and it's going to be violence. To use all these words that are so popular and basically take those therapeutic terms and really use them against this goal that they have. And I was like, oh, that's a really interesting idea. Like, that's kind of like, that probably would work. I didn't follow up with her to know if she did or didn't. But that got me thinking about, I wonder if, obviously, a version of that is already done in Christian content where Christians have taken the language of therapy and sort of added some Christianese, and they basically kind of recreate what the world says, but it sounds more Christian. But I was thinking, what if I could find a way to use more of this language of therapy and self-reflection with the intention of getting some of these social justice types to be more self-aware, which obviously is kind of a tall order, but I guess just thinking off the top of my head is something like, what kind of content could I produce that would make them be able to be more empathetic to Christian people? Because, so many of these people have lots of empathy, but it only goes so far. Like, it's got its limits, and its limits stop at like white people, Christians, traditional people of traditional lifestyles, just these certain groups where empathy is not allowed to be, extended to in any kind of really significant way. So I would just be curious on your thoughts on that, if that sounds like something interesting, or if you've seen that done before, or if I'm kind of on the right track of maybe finding a way to use social media in a way to, I don't know, shake things up a little bit.
Gosh, yeah, let me think about that. I think, well, one of the exercises I would encourage you to do is to look over John Gottman's compromise exercise. And I love the way he puts it. It's almost like an avocado. The nut is the most important thing, and then the squishy part is the least important thing. And the reason why there's so much nagging in relationships is because she or he is so focused on all the non-essentials, but they have failed to state their core bones, the thing they cannot live without, first and foremost, when they're communicating. And when you watch people communicate, it's usually why, over time, she will argue about the way your books are alphabetized and not alphabetized. And, she'll really get very, very upset that he didn't put the cumin on the egg. It just, what's going on there? And what I often have found when I'm doing a lot of couples is that it's usually because they have not stated the most important thing that they cannot live without. And the reason why is because they feel if they were to do that, it would be selfish of them. And it's quite the contrary. You know, if you were to start with that, you actually do become a lot more flexible. So the minute she's able to say in a triangle, such as I feel about what I need, it's a good way for me to remember, I feel hurt that you didn't include me last night when, you were hanging out with your friends. I just need you to at least give me a little bit of time with my own girlfriends so I can get some time away from the kids. Bam. That is really, really, really often very, very, very hard for her to say, because it's like, well, I don't want to bother him. He should have known that anyway. She's focused. And then what happens is that she then kind of feels like a doormat, and then she becomes kind of bitter. And that's when she starts focusing on all the little teeny tiny weensy particulars. Well, why didn't you do this? And then you're late over here. And then she starts to nag. And now she doesn't really like herself anymore. And then her husband kind of like wants to hang out. He wants to, hang away from her even more. And it's this very ugly cycle. But if I can get them to start with that, what is your core need? And it may take a while. I feel about what I need. I feel really very concerned about the Black community in my town because I've seen a lot of racism. I at least need to see the churches that are predominantly white to reach out to the African Americans in our community so they don't feel isolated. Oh, okay. You're nodding your head. I'm actually nodding my head. That doesn't sound like social. I'm like, all right, let's sit down. Yeah, that's a dang good need. But you're not getting that. You're getting all of the other crap that we're seeing. Right. But if you can get them to that point, you got somewhere. You have something. Then you're like, because I lived in Mississippi, and I actually was a liberal when I first came to Massachusetts because I saw a lot of racism, a lot of white churches. I became much more liberal, or I was more liberal back then, and now I'm not. But anyway, I won't go into that. But, I could get on with that. I'm like, okay, you know what? I've been in communities where that's actually been the case. Let's talk about it. Let's dialogue. Maybe I do read, a book that would challenge me that I often wouldn't read. I don't know. Yeah. So talking to your friend, I would challenge her to say, what is your core need? And state that to your professor. I feel what? I feel at odds, or, I feel, I guess, I don't want to use traumatized and all of those stuff. And the problem with a lot of that is because it's like, it's kind of hijacks from the core need a little bit. Right. But I feel torn reading this book because it has to do with something that I'm really uncomfortable with. Anyway, something like that. Yeah. And that, I need you to understand that this is really uncomfortable for me. Something like, I don't know if that's the best, but I would get her to think about it. So I like his issue of compromise. But the other thing too, without going too long, I would also recognize that person likely has a part of them that's very, very protective, and that is flooding them in the moment. And it's only uncovering or trying to deal with or trying to heal the very part of them that they are also very ashamed of. So there is a lot of hiding. And I make that assumption about anybody that's flooded, that is flooded, causing a significant amount of damage. I'm not excusing it. If anything, it could be very, hell is paved with very good intentions. And that's the quote, good intentions right there. So it's just, I hope I've answered the question. I think I did.
No, that's interesting. That's a good, that triangle is what? It's, I think, I feel, or what?
Well, I feel about what I need. I feel, I feel blank. About what's the issue? I need what? And the reason why I love that is because if you just talk about I need, you do look like you're pretty selfish. If you only talk about what you feel, but you're not talking about your needs or even about the issue. Yeah, right.
I think it's annoying personally.
Sure. Well, it is.
I'm just like, okay, you feel a lot though. It's too much. But you're right. When it has the need, when the need is there, that's way less annoying for some reason.
It is. Well, it's self-disclosure. It goes from criticism to you're trying to get the person from criticism to constructive feedback. criticism use statements. This is one of the reasons why I despise the critical race theory crap, is because it's the anti-racism, especially what Ibram Kendi and all this other stuff, because he's building a community. He's building a community that's going to be completely unable to ever have compromise. And it's going to be terrible because it's all about them being victims and everybody else totally getting blamed for everything. And that is not going to be good. It's going to be really, really, really cancerous in the long run. And what you're wanting to do is not build, this kind of critical environment. Excuse me. You don't just want communication where it's just purely criticism. You want it to get into constructive feedback so that I can understand what you are talking about. Give me I statements, not you statements. So you immediately let off your defenses when you hear, the comment that I just made about that person who has all those concerns about African Americans in those communities. Our heart just immediately just kind of goes out to that person. We don't feel defensive at all because it's not criticism. It's possible constructive feedback. And I'm learning so much more about this person than them describing everyone else. So if I can get the person to I just want you to work less. I want to hear your heart. Start with that. I want to hear you. Okay. I never have a real defensive husband who's just yelling and everything else. I've never had a guy get up and walk out when I say, John, give me your heart, buddy. Look at me, no, help me out. I think people ultimately will remember that and feel cared for. Because that's what you're fighting for. Right. Not
I like
BS.
it. I like that as a rule, as a general rule of if we could just hear each other, instead of, because we talked about this in the other podcast. Like I said, you guys should go listen to that. It's called Loving Others in a Woke World. But this idea that right now it's such a weird thing for everyone to speak for everyone else, to be like, I'm offended on behalf of all these people. Here's how you and your people are bad, and it's such an unfulfilling way to talk about anything. You don't leave it really feeling like you accomplished anything, and somebody leaves feeling very guilty. Somebody leaves feeling very vindicated. And it's not really true. Life doesn't really work like that. There's not this big class of homogeneous victims and this big class of homogeneous oppressors. Like it's much more complicated and interesting than that. So I think that strategy of how can I actually know what's going on with you specifically, what you specifically need and want, and then we can have a conversation about it. Really good.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for just doing some therapy with me, Peter. It was good. I needed it.
Yes, right. Yeah.
I needed it. Let's do it again. I could have a whole Stasios series. It could just be called Carmen Goes to Therapy.
Hey, yeah, I'd be glad to do it like once every few months or something. Yeah. I think that would be humorous. It would be fun. I could post it on my website as well, maybe.
Mental health check.
Yeah, right.
Exactly. Well, always fun to talk to you. Let's do this again. Oh, do you want to plug your podcast real quick?
Oh, sure. Yes.
Folks.
Sound Engagement. We're taking a small hiatus because Brad is moving, everything else. But we should be back in about a week or two.
Awesome.
We try to have a guest on, or we talk about once every 2 weeks or so. Yeah. And awesome. We have a lot of fun. Yeah. We've had some good conversations on there. So please check us out. Yes. Sound Engagement.
Sound Engagement podcast with Peter Anderson and Brad Mills.
Yes.
Thanks for listening, everybody.